My name is Florence Summers. I'm 68 years old. Last Tuesday, my daughter left me her 87th voicemail in 3 days. In it, she was crying so hard I could barely make out the words, but I caught one sentence. Mom, you can't do this to us. I saved every single one of those voicemails. Then I drove to my attorney's office, set my phone on his desk, and pressed play. He listened to 11 of them before he stopped me. He looked at me over his reading glasses and said 4 words. 4 words that ended 42 years of me being my family's backup plan, the one nobody actually planned to use. I'll tell you what those 4 words were. But first, you need to understand how a retired teacher from a small Texas town ended up with 87 voicemails and 3 adult children who suddenly couldn't live without her. Before I begin, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and your local time. Now let me take you back to a Sunday afternoon in March. The day I asked my children one simple question. I live in a 3-bedroom house on Pecan Street in Caldwell, Texas. Population 9,000, give or take. I've had the same mailbox for 31 years, the same cracked sidewalk, the same magnolia tree that drops its leaves every November like clockwork. The house is paid off. Has been since 2014. That was the year I made my last mortgage payment and stood in the kitchen, holding the deed with both hands like it was a diploma. I taught 3rd grade at Caldwell Elementary for 43 years. Room 14. I could draw the crack in the ceiling from memory. My salary averaged about $45,000 a year over the course of my career. Some years less, some years a little more. I never made what anyone would call good money, but I made disciplined money. I cut coupons until my fingers knew the scissor grooves by feel. I bought clothes at end-of-season sales. I drove the same Honda Accord for 14 years. I never went to Europe, never flew first class, never once bought a car that still had that new leather smell. Every dollar I didn't spend on myself, I spent on my children. By the time I retired 3 years ago, I had $620,000 in savings and retirement accounts. Combined with the house, appraised at about $280,000, my total estate sat just under $900,000. Nobody in my family knew the exact number. My children knew I was comfortable. They didn't know how comfortable. My husband Ray died 8 years ago. Lung cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to funeral. I handled every doctor's appointment, every insurance call, every night he couldn't sleep without someone holding his hand. I did it alone, because that's what I do. My cat Basil sat on the porch and watched the ambulance pull away the last time. He's still here. So am I. Let me tell you about my children when they were small. Jocelyn was my firstborn. Sharp as a thumbtack from day one. I drove her 3 hours round trip every week so she could compete in debate tournaments 2 counties over. She won state her junior year. I sat in the back of the auditorium in a dress I'd ironed twice and cried into a napkin. Derek, my middle child, was quieter. He liked taking things apart. Radios, clocks, once an entire lawnmower. I worked summer school 3 years in a row to pay for his engineering camp at Texas A&M. He built a robot that could sort marbles by color. I still have the photo on my fridge. Megan, my youngest, was the soft one. She wanted to be a nurse from the time she was 9. When her son Oliver needed open-heart surgery at 2 years old, I drove 400 miles, slept in a hospital chair for 3 weeks, and held her hand in a waiting room that smelled like floor wax and fear. That's who I was for 43 years. The driver, the funder, the one who showed up. Now let me tell you who they are today. Jocelyn calls once a month. The conversations average 4 minutes. She talks about her kitchen remodel, her Peloton scores, her husband Brad's promotion. She doesn't ask how I'm sleeping. Derek texts on Mother's Day. Sometimes he remembers my birthday. He lives 4 hours away in Austin and hasn't visited in 2 years. Megan calls when she needs me to watch Oliver. That's it. I used to tell myself the silence was normal. They're busy. They have their own families. That's what I said, until I realized something I should have noticed years earlier. They had a group chat, and I wasn't in it. In February, I went in for my annual physical. Dr. Nolan, same doctor for 15 years, checked my blood pressure, my cholesterol, my joints. Everything came back fine. Better than fine, actually. She said I was in excellent shape for my age. Then she paused, set her clipboard on the counter. looked at me the way I used to look at a student who'd missed too many days in a row. Florence, do you have a plan for your care if something happens? It was a routine question. She probably asked it 10 times a day, but it landed in my chest like a stone and stayed there for 3 days. Because I knew the answer. When Ray got sick, I was the plan. I rearranged every hour of my life around his appointments, his medications, his midnight terrors when the pain woke him gasping. I didn't ask my children for help. Not once. Partly because I'm stubborn. Partly because I truly assumed, that when my turn came, someone would do the same for me. But sitting in that exam room, I realized I'd never actually confirmed that assumption with anyone. I'd just carried it like a certainty, the way you carry your own name. Of course my children would be there. Of course. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and thought about falling. Just a simple fall, the kind older women take all the time. A broken hip, a concussion. Who would find me? Who would call the ambulance? Who would sit in the waiting room? The answer, if I was honest, was Basil. And cats don't dial phones. So I decided to ask. I planned a Sunday dinner. I set the table for 5. I made Jocelyn's favorite, chicken pot pie from scratch. I had no idea that Sunday would be the last meal I'd cook for all 3 of my children. They all came. That was the first surprise. Jocelyn drove in from her suburb 90 minutes away. Derek made the trip from Austin. Megan brought Oliver, who ran straight to my magnolia tree and started digging for worms. For 2 hours, it almost felt like a family again. We ate at the oak table Ray built the year Jocelyn was born. I used my mother's china, the set with the blue rim that only comes out on holidays. Sunlight cut through the kitchen window and hit the serving dish in a way that made everything glow. After dessert, I poured coffee. I folded my hands on the table. I want to talk about something, I said. When I get older, when I can't live alone anymore, I need to know which of you will be there. The clock on the wall ticked 9 times. I counted. Derek spoke first. He set his mug down carefully, like the table might break. Mom, I'm 4 hours away. That's not realistic. Megan looked at Jocelyn, waited, then, I don't think I could handle that. Medically, I mean. Jocelyn was last. She didn't look up from her phone. Mom, we all have our own lives. You should look into options. There are good facilities. 3 children, 3 refusals, in under a minute. What struck me wasn't the answers. It was how coordinated they sounded. Derek's excuse was geography. Megan's was capability. Jocelyn's was philosophy. Each one perfectly non-overlapping, like they'd rehearsed it. I didn't say another word that night. I cleared the dishes alone, washed my mother's china by hand, 1 plate at a time, the way I've done since I was 12. Something had already started to shift inside me, a lock turning in a door I hadn't known was there. 3 days later, Megan stopped by to pick up a jacket Oliver had left behind. She stayed maybe 10 minutes. We talked about the weather, about Oliver's spelling test, about nothing that mattered. When she left, she forgot her iPad on the kitchen counter. I wasn't going to look. That's the truth. I walked past it twice on my way to the coffee pot, but the screen lit up on its own, the way screens do, and a notification slid down from the top. Siblings only. My hand stopped on the coffee pot handle. The notification was from Jocelyn, sent the morning before our Sunday dinner, before the chicken pot pie, before the 9 seconds of silence. I picked up the iPad. The chat was open. Jocelyn's message read, "Whatever you do, don't volunteer for anything. Let her figure it out. When she goes to a home, we sell the house and split it. That's the plan." I scrolled up. Derek. What if she asks us directly? Jocelyn. Just say you're too far away or too busy. She won't push. She never does. Megan. I feel bad. Jocelyn. You'll feel worse if you're stuck changing diapers for free for 10 years. 36 messages. That's how long their plan for my old age was. 36 messages arranging who would say what and when. My Sunday dinner wasn't a conversation. It was a performance, and I was the only one who didn't have a script. I set the iPad face down on the counter, exactly where Megan had left it. I washed my face. I walked out to the porch, sat in Ray's rocking chair, and stared at the magnolia tree for 2 hours. Basil sat in my lap the entire time. I didn't cry. I think I was past crying. but I did pick up the phone. Not to call my children, to call someone else entirely. I called Ruth. Ruth Calloway lives 3 houses down. She's 71, widowed like me, and the only person in Caldwell who can make me laugh hard enough to snort coffee through my nose. We've been friends since our husbands played on the same church softball team 20 years ago. I told her everything. The dinner, the silence, the group chat. Ruth listened without interrupting, which, for Ruth, is practically an act of God. When I finished, she said one sentence. "Honey, those kids aren't planning for your future. They're planning for your funeral." It hit like a slap, not because it was cruel, because it was accurate. And once Ruth said it, I couldn't unsee the pattern. The small questions that weren't small at all. Jocelyn, 2 Christmases ago. "Mom, what do you think the house is worth now? The market's crazy." I thought she was making conversation. She was pricing the asset. Derek, last Thanksgiving. "Mom, have you updated your estate plan? Just want to make sure you're protected." I thought he cared. He was checking the inventory. Megan knew I had savings. She'd seen me write a check to the hospital when Oliver had his surgery. She knew I could write 5-figure checks without flinching. They didn't want to take care of me. They wanted to wait me out. That night, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I opened the filing cabinet in Ray's old office, the bottom drawer, the one with the folder I hadn't touched since the last time Gerald Whitmore updated our estate plan. The tab said Last Will and Testament. I pulled it out, set it on the desk, and stared at it the way you stare at a door you know you're about to walk through. Then I picked up the phone again. This time, I called Gerald. Gerald Whitmore has been my attorney for 20 years. He drew up Ray's and my wills back when Megan was still in high school. He's 63, bald as an egg, and speaks in sentences that sound like they've already been notarized. I called him Monday morning at 8 sharp. His secretary said he could see me Thursday. I said I'd be there at 9. When I sat down across from his desk, he folded his hands and asked, "What changed?" "My children's honesty," I said. I told him about the Sunday dinner, about the iPad, about the 36 messages. Gerald listened without expression. Lawyers are good at that. Then he pulled a legal pad from his drawer and clicked his pen. "Florence, under Texas law, a revocable will is entirely within your control. You can change it any time, for any reason, as long as you're of sound mind. Your adult children have no legal right to your estate, no automatic share, no forced inheritance. You don't even need to tell them." I told him what I wanted, all of it, every account, the house, the IRA, the savings, to the Meadowbrook Children's Hospital Foundation, the hospital that operated on Oliver's heart 5 years ago, the place that kept my grandson alive when his lungs forgot how to work on their own. Gerald set his pen down. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything since the day I quit smoking in 1992. He didn't smile, but something moved behind his eyes. "I'll have the new documents ready by Friday." I drove home with the windows down. March air, still cool, smelling like cut grass and rain coming. For the first time in 8 years, the house didn't feel empty when I pulled into the driveway. It felt mine. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Should I have told my children before I changed the will? Given them a chance to step up? I asked myself that too. Sat with it for a whole evening. But then I remembered those 36 messages in the siblings-only chat. The plan was already made. The performance was already rehearsed. My Sunday dinner was never a conversation. It was a script they'd written without me. So no, I didn't owe them a warning. If this story is hitting close to home for you, hit that like button. And if you've ever had to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to protect you, tell me about it in the comments. We're just getting started. That Friday, I drove to Gerald's office at 8:45. I wore a blue blouse Ray had always liked and a pair of earrings I'd bought at a craft fair in 1997. I don't know why those details matter. Maybe because I wanted to feel like myself. The real version, not the one my children had edited down to Mom and ATM. Gerald had everything ready. 2 witnesses, his secretary, Diane, and his accountant, Paul, sat on opposite sides of the conference table. A notary waited in the corner with her stamp and seal. Gerald read the key clause aloud. "I, Florence Elaine Summers, of sound mind, do hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils. I bequeath the entirety of my estate, including all savings accounts, retirement funds, and real property located at 412 Pecan Street, Caldwell, Texas, to the Meadowbrook Children's Hospital Foundation, to be used for the purpose of funding pediatric cardiac care. The room was quiet. Diane's pen stopped moving. Paul looked at me over his glasses. I think they both expected me to hesitate. I signed my name the same way I'd signed 31 years of report cards. Steady hand. Gerald added one more layer. Florence, I'd also like to schedule a mental competency evaluation. Independent physician, documented and dated. If anyone challenges this will down the road, this evaluation closes the door before it opens. I agreed. If my children wanted to claim I was confused, I wanted the paperwork to prove otherwise. We finished in 40 minutes. Gerald walked me to the door and shook my hand. Your will isn't just valid, Florence. It's bulletproof. I walked to my car, sat behind the wheel, and looked at the travel agency across the street. A poster in the window showed a glacier. Alaska. I hadn't booked a trip for myself in 43 years. 2 weeks later, Jocelyn invited me to brunch. Her house, the big colonial in the nice subdivision an hour and a half north of Caldwell. White shutters, landscaped lawn, a doorbell camera that probably cost more than my first car. I went. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to see what she'd do now that the script had been performed and the Sunday dinner was behind us. She put on a show. The dining table was set with cloth napkins. Brad wore a polo. Their neighbor couple, the Hennings, had been invited. Witnesses, though they didn't know it. Halfway through the quiche, Jocelyn set down her fork and smiled at me, the kind of smile that takes practice. Mom, Brad and I have been talking. We want to put a suite in the basement for you, for when you're older. Right, Brad? Brad nodded. His eyes drifted to the window. I looked at my daughter, the girl who'd won state debate, the woman who'd typed, "Let her figure it out," into a group chat and pressed send. She was building a case, right there at the brunch table, in front of neighbors who'd remember the offer. If anything ever came into question, if the will was ever contested, Jocelyn would have people who could say, "She offered her mother a room, she tried." I sipped my coffee. That's kind of you to mention, Jocelyn. That was all I said. I didn't argue. I didn't confront. I finished my quiche, complimented the Hennings on their rose garden, and drove home. When I got back to Pecan Street, I opened my laptop. I searched flights to Anchorage, Alaska. Departure, 2 weeks out, 2 tickets. I told no one about the trip. Not Jocelyn, not Derek, not Megan. The only person who knew was Ruth, because she was coming with me. The call came on a Tuesday evening. Derek's name on the screen. My son doesn't call on Tuesdays. My son barely calls at all. Hey, Mom, how are you feeling? Fine, Derek. Better than fine. 30 seconds of small talk. The weather in Austin. A project at work. Then his voice shifted. Just slightly, the way a car shifts gears when it's about to accelerate. Mom, I've been thinking. Have you considered setting up a trust? So things are easier for everyone later? There it was. He didn't ask what the doctor said at my physical. He didn't ask if I needed anything. He didn't ask if I was lonely. He asked about estate architecture. I already have an estate plan, Derek. My lawyer handles it. A pause. 3 seconds. Then, okay. Just don't let anyone talk you into anything weird. I let that sentence hang in the air. Anyone didn't mean a stranger. It didn't mean a scammer. It meant don't let anyone talk you into leaving your money somewhere we can't reach it. Good night, Derek. Night, Mom. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed. My suitcase lay open on the comforter, half packed for Alaska. Sweaters, hiking boots, the waterproof jacket I'd bought at the outlet store, the first piece of clothing I'd purchased for a trip in over a decade. I thought about Derek at 12, sitting on the garage floor surrounded by lawnmower parts, grease on his forehead, grinning like he'd discovered the moon. I thought about Derek at 39, calling his mother on a Tuesday to ask about trust structures. Same boy, different currency. I zipped the suitcase shut. Basil jumped off the bed and padded toward the kitchen. Outside, a mockingbird was singing its last song before dark. Tomorrow, I was leaving. Ruth and I left for the airport at 5 in the morning. I'd made arrangements with the Garcias next door to feed Basil and water the garden. I left a casserole in the freezer for no particular reason. Old habits. Before I pulled out of the driveway, I sent one text to the family group chat. The real one, the one I was included in. I'll be traveling for a while. Ruth is with me. I'll check in when I can. Jocelyn replied in under a minute. Traveling where? For how long? I didn't answer. Derek. A thumbs up emoji. Nothing else. Megan. Be safe, Mom. With a red heart. The only message that felt like it came from a person instead of a position. On the plane, I sat in a window seat. Ruth fell asleep before takeoff, mouth open, neck pillow already crooked. I stared through the oval glass as Texas shrank into brown squares and green strips. I watched rivers become threads. I watched my town disappear. For the first time in 43 years, nobody needed me to be anywhere. No alarm for school, no appointment for Ray, no pickup time for Oliver, no lesson plans, no grocery lists, no phone calls to return. Alaska was enormous. There's no other word for it. We took a boat through Glacier Bay, and I stood on the top deck while a wall of ice the color of toothpaste calved into the ocean. The sound was like thunder in slow motion. A humpback whale surfaced so close I could see the barnacles on its jaw. Ruth turned to me and said, "You know, Florence, you look 10 years younger." I laughed. It was the first real laugh, the kind that starts deep and doesn't ask permission, in months. I would visit 3 countries in 6 months. I would eat meals I couldn't pronounce, and I would not answer my phone, not once. Portugal was where it hit me. Ruth and I were sitting at a cafe in Lisbon, the kind with iron chairs and tiny cups, and a view of a river that doesn't care about your problems. I had a postcard in front of me. Not for Jocelyn, not for Derek, not for Megan. I was writing to Meadowbrook Children's Hospital. Dear Director, I am writing to thank you for saving my grandson's life 5 years ago. His name is Oliver. He was 2 years old when his heart stopped doing what hearts are supposed to do. Your surgeons gave him back to us. I intend to make sure you can give other children back to their families, too. I sealed it and dropped it in a bright red mailbox on a cobblestone street 6,000 miles from home. That postcard carried a promise I'd been forming since the day I read those 36 text messages. But writing it down, putting ink on paper, made it real in a way the legal documents hadn't. I thought about Oliver at 2. Blue lips, wires everywhere, a machine breathing for him because his own lungs had given up the argument. I thought about the surgeon, Dr. Kimura, who stood in the hallway at 1 a.m. and told me, in a voice that was steady but kind, that Oliver was going to make it. I was the one in that hallway. Not Jocelyn, not Derek, not even Megan, who was curled in a chair in the waiting room, too scared to stand. I was the one who shook Dr. Kimura's hand and said, "Thank you for keeping my family whole. Oliver is alive because strangers donated money to a hospital they'd never visit. I decided to be one of those strangers, just with a bigger envelope." I mailed that letter from Lisbon. I didn't know it then, but it would reach Texas before I did. I made exactly 1 phone call about my estate during the entire 6 months. It was from a hotel room in Queenstown, New Zealand, at 2 a.m. local time, which made it about 8 a.m. in Texas. Gerald picked up on the second ring. "Florence, how's the Southern Hemisphere?" "Beautiful. Gerald, I'm calling about the file." He'd been busy while I was gone. The mental competency evaluation was complete. Dr. Elaine Patterson, a board-certified psychiatrist in Bryan, had examined me 2 days before I signed the will. Her report was 12 pages long and concluded, in language so clinical it was almost boring, that I was fully oriented, cognitively intact, and making decisions consistent with my stated values and life history. Gerald had also prepared a memorandum of intent, a 2-page letter, in my own words, explaining why I'd changed the will. Not out of anger, not as punishment, but because I wanted my life savings to go to the place that had already proven it would protect my family when my family wouldn't protect itself. "If they contest," Gerald said, "the first thing they'll claim is that you weren't in your right mind. Dr. Patterson's evaluation shuts that door. The memorandum shuts the window. And the fact that you consulted me independently, without any third party present, shuts everything else." Has this happened before, in your practice? 3 times this year alone. Parents changing their wills after their children showed their cards. Every contest was dismissed. Florence, the courts are very clear on this. Testamentary freedom is nearly absolute in Texas. I thanked him, hung up, walked to the edge of a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Dark water, white stars, a wind that smelled like salt and eucalyptus. I stood there for 10 minutes. Not because I was afraid, because I was free. I came home in September. The magnolia had dropped its first leaves early. Basil was fat, the Garcias had clearly overfed him, and the garden had a few weeds, but the tomatoes were still producing. I picked 6 off the vine before I even unlocked the door. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Dust on the picture frames. Ray's reading glasses still on the nightstand where I always keep them. My coffee mug in the dish rack, right where it had been drying for 6 months. I spent my first day home hanging photographs. The glacier in Glacier Bay, the tile rooftops of Lisbon. A lighthouse perched on the edge of New Zealand's coast like it was daring the ocean to try something. I put them in frames I'd bought at a shop in the Algarve, wooden frames, hand-painted with tiny blue fish. I called all 3 children that evening. Jocelyn. Oh, good, we were starting to wonder. She didn't ask where I'd been. Derek. Cool. 1 word. That was my son's welcome home. Megan. Welcome back, Mom. Oliver missed you. She was the only one who sounded like she meant it. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling in the dark. 6 months. I'd been gone for half a year. Nobody checked the house. Nobody offered to pick me up at the airport. Nobody asked if I'd eaten dinner. The spare key was still under the same flower pot, undisturbed, just like my absence had been. But something else was true, too. I'd slept in 13 hotels, eaten food I couldn't spell, watched the sunset over 3 different oceans, and I'd done all of it on money I earned 1 school year at a time. I closed my eyes. I was home for exactly 11 days before the phone call started. My Aunt Patty turned 78 in October. The party was at her daughter Linda's house. About 20 relatives, a sheet cake from the H-E-B bakery, and enough potato salad to fill a bathtub. Linda is my cousin. She's 55, sweet as pie, and physically incapable of keeping information to herself. She once told half the church about a neighbor's hip replacement before the neighbor had even woken up from anesthesia. I was standing near the punch bowl when Linda walked over, lowered her voice to what she considered a whisper, which for Linda still carried about 15 feet, and said, Florence, I heard from someone at Gerald's office that you made some big changes to your estate. Is everything okay? I felt the air in the room shift. Not dramatically, not the way it does in movies. More like the hum of a refrigerator kicking off. A silence you only notice because something was there before. Everything is exactly as I want it, Linda. She patted my arm. Oh, I didn't mean to pry. I just thought it was interesting, that's all. But I'd already seen it. 3 meters to my left, near the fireplace, Jocelyn stood holding a paper plate. Her fork was halfway to her mouth. Her eyes were on me, not blinking. She'd heard every word. I excused myself 10 minutes later, told Aunt Patty I had a headache, kissed her cheek, and walked to my car. The engine was still warming up when my phone buzzed twice in my purse. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening. Jocelyn was calling Derek. Derek was calling Megan. The siblings-only chat was lighting up like a switchboard. I drove home, locked the door, turned off the phone. Not because I was scared, because I wanted one more quiet night before the storm. Jocelyn went to work. Not her day job, her other skill set. The one she'd honed since childhood. Information extraction disguised as concern. She called Gerald's office first thing Monday morning. His secretary Diane answered. I'm calling about my mother's estate documents. Florence Summers? I'd like to review the recent changes. Diane, who'd been Gerald's gatekeeper for 22 years, didn't flinch. I'm not at liberty to discuss my client's estate planning. You're welcome to have your mother contact us directly. Jocelyn hung up, called the bank, asked about Florence Summers' account activity. The teller asked for the last 4 digits of the social. Jocelyn didn't have them. Call ended. She called Linda back, pushed harder. Linda, who told you? What exactly did they say? Linda only knew 2 words. Big changes. She couldn't confirm anything specific. For once, her gossip was uselessly vague. By Tuesday night, Jocelyn had called both siblings. She changed the will, Jocelyn told Megan. Her voice was flat and tight, like a wire about to snap. She changed who gets it. Megan. Maybe she just updated it? Added a charity clause or something? No, Megan. She changed who gets it. I can feel it. She called Derek next. Derek, who had $85,000 in credit card and auto loan debt that no one in the family knew about, went quiet for a long time. Changed how? He finally asked. That night, Jocelyn told Brad. And Brad, who had spent 2 years assuming the inheritance was a near certainty, said something that Jocelyn hadn't expected. If she cut you out, we need to talk to a lawyer. Jocelyn sat at her kitchen island and stared at the granite countertop she'd planned to rip out and replace. With her mother's money. For the first time, she was afraid. Not of losing me, of losing face. The voicemails started on a Wednesday. Day 1. 28 messages. Jocelyn opened Sweet. Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we please just talk? Call me back. By afternoon, her tone tightened. Mom, pick up. This is important. I'm not going to keep calling an empty phone. By 9 that night, Derek joined in. Mom, Jocelyn told me some stuff. Is it true? Just call me, okay? Megan, last, her voice shaking. Mom, please call me back. I'm scared. Day 2. 30 messages. Jocelyn abandoned the sweetness. Mom, you can't do this to us. We're your children. Do you understand what you're doing? Derek with a new edge. Mom, this isn't fair. We never did anything to you. You're going to regret this. And then, at 11 at night, Jocelyn left a voicemail that made me set down my tea. Do you know what Dad would think? He'd be ashamed of you. I played that one twice. Not because it hurt, though it did. Because it told me everything I needed to know about my daughter. She wasn't grieving. She was negotiating. And she'd just brought a dead man to the table as leverage. Day 3. 29 messages. Jocelyn crying. I can't believe you would do this. I can't. Derek, angry now. You realize we could take you to court, right? Is that what you want? And Megan, at the end of the 3rd day, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, I just want to understand. 87 voicemails in 72 hours. I listened to every single one. I didn't answer a single call. I wrote the date and summary of each message in a lined notebook, the same kind I used for lesson plans. On the morning of day 4, I put my phone in my purse, drove to Gerald's office, and set it on his desk. Jocelyn came to my house on a Saturday morning. No call ahead, no text, just the crunch of tires on gravel and a car door slamming hard enough to scare the mockingbird off the magnolia. She was still in workout clothes, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked like she hadn't slept. I opened the front door but didn't step aside. We can talk on the porch. She stayed standing, arms crossed. Her jaw was set the way it used to be before a debate round, except this time there was no judge to impress. Mom, I know you changed the will. You need to change it back. We're your family. You told your brother and sister not to take care of me. That's in writing. The color left her face, not slowly. All at once, like someone had pulled a plug. That was taken out of context. We were just venting. Venting doesn't include the phrase, sell the house and split it. She shifted tactics the way she always does. A lifetime of competitive debate taught her to pivot when the first argument collapses. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm your daughter. Don't I mean anything to you? You mean everything to me. That's why this hurts as much as it does. But I'm not changing my mind. She stood up. Her eyes were red but dry now. The tears had been strategic, and we both knew it. You'll regret this. I've spent 68 years without regrets, Jocelyn. I'm not starting now. She walked to her car. The tires sprayed gravel as she pulled away. A neighbor across the street looked up from her garden. I waved. She waved back. I went inside. My hands were shaking. The first time they'd done that since I signed the will. But I poured a cup of tea, sat down at the kitchen table, and didn't cry. Not this time. I knew Jocelyn wouldn't stop there. When you tell someone no for the first time after a lifetime of yes, they don't hear a boundary. They hear a malfunction. Something must be broken. Something must be fixed. and they will keep pushing until they find the version of you that still bends. But that version of me was gone. She left sometime between reading those 36 messages and signing her name on a new will. If you know what it's like to stand your ground when the people closest to you are trying to move it, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the next part of this story is the reason I walked into my lawyer's office with a phone full of voicemails, and those 4 words Gerald said, they changed everything. Gerald was already at his desk when I arrived, coffee in a ceramic mug that said "World's Okayest Lawyer," a gift from his daughter, he once told me. He took one look at my face and said, "Sit down." I placed my phone on his desk. Screen up, speaker on. I pressed play. Voicemail number 1, Jocelyn Sweet. "Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Gerald listened. Number 3, Derek. "Is it true?" Number 7, Jocelyn, sharper. "You can't do this to us." Number 11, Jocelyn, at 11 at night. "Dad would be ashamed of you." Gerald held up one hand. He took off his reading glasses, set them on the desk, and looked at me. 4 words. "They have no claim." He let that sit. Then he continued, his voice steady and even, the way a man speaks when he's said the same truth enough times to know it by heart. "Florence, in the state of Texas, a revocable will is the exclusive instrument of the testator. Your adult children are not forced heirs. They have no statutory right to a single dollar of your estate. To contest, they would need to prove undue influence. But you came to me alone, by your own initiative, or testamentary incapacity. But you have a 12-page psychiatric evaluation dated 2 days before signing. Or fraud, which doesn't exist here." He tapped the phone. "These voicemails help your case. They demonstrate that their objection is financial, not relational. Not one of these messages asks how you're doing. Not one asks if you need anything. Every single one is about the money." He paused. "I can send a formal letter to all 3, certified mail, confirming the will is executed, valid, and final, and requesting they cease all harassing contact." "Send it," I said. He nodded once. "Done." I picked up my phone. The screen showed 43 missed calls. I didn't feel a thing. The letters went out on a Monday. Certified mail, return receipt requested. White envelopes, Gerald's firm name embossed in the corner, the kind of paper that feels heavier than it should. Each letter said the same thing. "Florence Elaine Summers has executed a new last will and testament, properly witnessed, notarized, and accompanied by a documented mental competency evaluation. The contents of the will are private and final. Any further contact of a coercive, threatening, or harassing nature will be documented and may be referred to appropriate authorities." Jocelyn received hers on Wednesday. Brad told me later, much later, what happened. She opened it at the kitchen island. Read it once, read it again. Then she slammed it on the granite counter and said a word I won't repeat in this story. Brad picked it up, read it himself, and walked out of the room without saying anything. Derek received his on Thursday. He sat in his apartment in Austin, opened his laptop, and typed "Contest Will Texas" into a search engine. He read for an hour. Then he closed the laptop and stared at the wall. Megan received hers on Friday. She called Jocelyn, crying. Jocelyn's response: "She's trying to scare us. We're not giving up." But Jocelyn did one more thing. She called a probate attorney in Houston, paid $350 for an initial consultation. The attorney reviewed the facts, independent counsel, competency evaluation, memorandum of intent, and said something that Gerald could have told her for free. "Ma'am, I'd be happy to take your money, but you won't win this case." After that, the voicemails stopped. The texts stopped. For 2 weeks my phone was silent, and the silence was louder than 87 messages had ever been. Then came Thanksgiving. Jocelyn called a sibling meeting, without me naturally, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I know this because Megan told me, much later, when she was ready to start telling the truth. The plan was simple. Thanksgiving at Jocelyn's house. Turkey, mashed potatoes, the whole production. Invite Mom. She always comes. She'll walk into a room full of family, and they'll sit her down, lovingly of course, and explain that she's making a mistake. Jocelyn assigned roles like a stage director. She would open with emotion. "Mom, we love you. We're sorry. We should have handled things differently. Brad would follow with logic, a prepared set of points about why leaving your estate to strangers instead of family was financially and morally misguided. Derek would play the quiet middle child, nodding at the right moments. Megan would be the closer, the emotional one, the one with the grandchild card. And if she says no, Derek asked, then we tell her she's making a mistake and she's going to die alone. Megan hesitated. I don't want to gang up on her. It's not ganging up, Jocelyn said. It's an intervention, for her own good. They rehearsed it. They actually rehearsed it, talking points, emotional beats, even the seating arrangement. Florence would sit at the head of the table, flanked by Jocelyn and Brad. Derek and his wife at the far end. Megan and Tyler near the kitchen, in case Oliver needed to be removed. Nobody called me to ask if I was coming. They assumed I would, because I always had. They planned everything, the menu, the timing, the script. What they didn't plan for was who I'd bring with me, or what I'd carry in my bag, or the fact that I'd already made my own plan and it didn't involve saying a single word. Ruth knew before I told her. She showed up on my porch 2 days before Thanksgiving with a bottle of wine and a look that said she'd already mapped the terrain. You know what they're planning, right? Of course. And you're still going. I'm going. Not because they want me there, because I want to close this chapter. Ruth sat down, poured 2 glasses. Then we go together. I spent the next 2 days preparing. Not food. Jocelyn was handling the turkey. I was handling something else. I picked out the cashmere sweater I'd bought in Lisbon. Soft gray, the color of a morning fog. I hadn't owned cashmere in my life. It felt like wearing a second skin that actually fit. I called Gerald. Anything I should know? Don't sign anything. Don't promise anything. If they threaten legal action, tell them to contact my office. And Florence, you don't owe them an explanation. The documents speak for themselves. I packed the photo album I'd assembled since coming home. Every trip, every glacier, every cobblestone street, every sunset. Portugal, Alaska, New Zealand. Page after page of a life I'd been too busy sacrificing to live. But it was the last page that mattered most. On the left, a photograph of Oliver at 2 years old, lying in a hospital bed at Meadowbrook. Tubes in his nose, wires on his chest, his eyes closed. His skin so pale it looked transparent. On the right, Oliver at 7, standing in my backyard, holding a magnolia leaf the size of his face, laughing so hard his eyes were shut. I closed the album, put it in my bag, stood in front of the bathroom mirror and practiced the only thing that mattered. Silence. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to let the quiet do what my words never could. We arrived at 1:30. Ruth drove. I held the album in my lap like a hymnal. Jocelyn opened the door. Her smile was magazine perfect, until she saw Ruth standing behind me on the porch. I didn't know you were bringing company. Ruth is my guest. I hope that's all right. It wasn't a question. Jocelyn knew it. Ruth knew it. I certainly knew it. But manners have their own gravity, and Jocelyn stepped aside. The house smelled like sage and butter. The table was set with the good china, 12 place settings, cloth napkins, a centerpiece of autumn leaves and white candles. Jocelyn had gone all in on the production. Derek sat in the living room with his wife Laura, both holding glasses of wine like they were life preservers. Megan stood in the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. Tyler leaned against the counter, quiet as always. Brad stood near the fireplace, whiskey in hand, wearing the expression of a man who'd been given a script he didn't fully believe in. Oliver ran straight into my arms. "Grandma Flo!" I picked him up, kissed his forehead, set him down. He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the table. "I made a turkey out of my hand. Look!" I looked. I told him it was the best hand turkey I'd ever seen, because it was. Then I set the photo album on the coffee table. Didn't announce it, didn't explain it, just placed it there, next to a bowl of mixed nuts, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Everyone noticed. Nobody asked. Dinner started. Small talk circled the table like a nervous bird. Jocelyn kept glancing at Brad. Brad kept checking his watch. Derek's wife Laura complimented the mashed potatoes 3 times. Everyone was waiting for someone to start. So was I. But not for the same thing. It happened between the pumpkin pie and the coffee. Tyler took Oliver outside to look at the neighbor's Christmas lights, early this year, but Oliver didn't care. The back door clicked shut. The room contracted. Brad cleared his throat. He set his napkin on the table and looked at me the way a man looks at a spreadsheet he's about to present. Florence, we wanted to talk about your estate plans, as a family. I folded my hands in my lap. Didn't speak. Jocelyn picked up the thread. Mom, we know you're upset. We understand. But giving everything to strangers? That's not what Dad would have wanted. I looked at her, held her gaze. Don't speak for your father. Derek leaned forward. Mom, we're not trying to fight. We just think you made this decision when you were emotional. I made this decision after consulting my attorney, passing a mental competency evaluation, and writing a personal memorandum of intent. Would you like the date and time? Silence. Brad set his whiskey on the mantel. Derek's wife Laura pressed her lips together and stared at her plate. Nobody in the room had known about the competency evaluation. Jocelyn's composure cracked. So that's it? You're just going to throw away our inheritance? I let one beat pass, then I said it. It was never your inheritance. It was my savings, 43 years of them. The room didn't breathe. And then, from the kitchen doorway, a voice. Small. Not angry. Just broken. Megan. Mom. Why the hospital? I didn't answer with words. I stood up, walked to the coffee table and opened the photo album to the last page. I carried it back and set it in front of Megan. Left side, Oliver at 2. Hospital bed, wires, eyes closed. Right side, Oliver at 7. Magnolia leaf, laughing. Megan looked down. Her hand went to her mouth. The room fell apart quietly. Megan's shoulders started shaking first. She didn't make a sound, just sat there with both hands pressed over her mouth, staring at the photograph of her son, connected to machines that breathed for him because his heart had forgotten how. Derek looked away. His jaw was working, the way it does when he's trying not to feel something. Laura put her hand on his arm. He didn't move. Brad set his whiskey glass down, slowly, carefully, as if the sound of it touching the mantel might detonate something. His talking points were still in his shirt pocket, folded in thirds. He didn't reach for them. Jocelyn opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out, because the photo was the answer to the only question that mattered. Why the hospital? And the answer was her nephew. Alive. Playing in a backyard he almost never got to see. I closed the album. I looked at the room. My 3 children, their spouses, my friend. A table full of food that nobody was eating anymore. I said one sentence. I'm not angry. I'm just done waiting for something that was never coming. I stood up. Ruth stood up beside me. Thank you for dinner, Jocelyn. The turkey was lovely. I walked to the door. Didn't rush. Didn't slam. Didn't look back. I opened it, stepped through, and pulled it shut behind me with the same care I'd use closing a book I'd finished reading. Nobody followed us. Ruth and I drove home in silence. The highway was empty. Everyone else was inside, doing what families do on Thanksgiving. When we pulled into my driveway, Ruth turned off the engine and sat still for a moment. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do at a dining table. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I made us both tea. That night I sat on the porch with Basil in my lap and a cup of chamomile going cold in my hands. The moon was 3/4 full, sitting low over the pecan trees. A dog barked somewhere on the next block. Then nothing. My phone hadn't made a sound since I left Jocelyn's house. No voicemails, no texts, no calls. The silence was so complete it had its own texture, thick, like a wool blanket pulled over the whole town. Before bed, I opened my laptop and found a new email. From Meadowbrook Children's Hospital, the Development Office. The subject line read, Your letter from Lisbon. The message was short. The director thanked me for the letter. She said the hospital was deeply moved by my words about Oliver. She asked if I would be willing to meet after the new year to discuss the details of my intended gift. I typed a reply. I'd be honored. anytime after January 1st. I closed the laptop and walked to the bedroom. On the nightstand, next to Ray's reading glasses, there's a framed photo from our wedding day. Ray in a rented tuxedo, me in a dress my mother sewed by hand. Both of us 23, standing on the steps of Caldwell Baptist Church, grinning like we knew something the rest of the world didn't. Ray said something to me the last week of his life. His voice was mostly gone by then, just a rasp really, but he gripped my hand and said, "Flo, promise me you'll spend it on something that matters." I'd thought something that matters meant the children. For 8 years, I carried that promise like a compass, pointing toward Jocelyn, Derek, and Megan. It took 68 years, but I finally learned to read the compass right. I turned off the light, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. The fallout didn't come all at once. It seeped. Jocelyn's world cracked first. Not from the outside, but from the inside, the way a windshield splinters when the pressure starts from within. Brad stopped talking about the kitchen renovation. He'd been planning it for 2 years. New countertops, a built-in wine rack, custom cabinetry. The budget assumed a certain number that Jocelyn had assured him was coming. An inheritance she'd described as basically guaranteed. When the guarantee evaporated, so did the trust. Not the legal kind, the kind that holds a marriage together. "You told me your mother adored you," Brad said one evening. Jocelyn told Megan this later, when things between the sisters finally shifted. Turns out she was just the one who kept showing up. Brad moved to the guest room. Not permanently, not yet, but the distance was real. In Jocelyn's social circle, news traveled the way it always does in suburbs, through book clubs and tennis matches and school pickup lines. Someone heard from Linda. Linda heard from someone at the church. Within a month, the polite version of the story had made its rounds. Florence Summers changed her will, and Jocelyn wasn't in it. The questions Jocelyn dreaded came in soft voices over lattes. "Is everything okay with your mother?" Nobody asked, "What did you do?" But nobody needed to. Florence Summers was the woman who'd taught half the children in Caldwell to read. She didn't make rash decisions. Jocelyn tried to control the narrative. "Mom isn't well," she told a few people. "She's been influenced by her neighbor." But Ruth, who volunteered at the library, sang in the church choir, and had more friends in Caldwell than the magnolia tree had leaves, only needed to show up to Sunday service, healthy and sharp, to make that story collapse. The second lawyer Jocelyn consulted said the same thing the first one did. "I strongly advise you not to pursue this." Derek's unraveling was quieter, but deeper. The inheritance had been his exit plan, not emotionally, financially. $85,000 in debt, split between 3 credit cards and an auto loan he'd taken out to buy a truck he couldn't afford. He'd been paying minimums for 2 years, treading water with the quiet confidence of a man who believed a lifeboat was coming. The lifeboat sank at a Thanksgiving dinner table. His wife, Laura, noticed the change first. Derek stopped sleeping. He checked his banking app 4, 5, 6 times a day. He snapped at her over a grocery receipt. One night in December, Laura sat on the edge of their bed and said the sentence that broke the dam. "Why do you care about your mother's will so much?" Derek said nothing for a long time. Then he opened his phone, pulled up a spreadsheet he'd been hiding in a password-protected app, and turned the screen toward her. Laura looked at the numbers. Then she looked at him. "You've been lying to me for 3 years, and you expected your mother to bail you out?" Derek didn't argue. He couldn't. The spreadsheet was the truth, and the truth was uglier than any voicemail he'd ever left on my phone. They didn't separate, not exactly, but something between them went cold, the way a room goes cold when someone opens a window in January and doesn't bother to close it. Derek started selling things. The truck went first, then the watch he'd bought himself for his 35th birthday. He enrolled in a debt management program. He didn't call me. I didn't expect him to, not yet. Derek had always been the one who needed time to take things apart before he could understand how they worked. Even as a boy, he never read the manual first. Megan called 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. I was in the kitchen, watering the Christmas cactus Ray had given me the year before he died. It blooms every December, pink and insistent, as if it's trying to remind me that some things come back. The phone rang. Megan's name on the screen. I picked up but didn't speak first. "Mom." Her voice was steady but barely, like a wire pulled taut. I'm not calling to ask you to change anything. I waited. I'm calling to say I'm sorry. I sat down at the kitchen table. Basil jumped into my lap and I let him stay. I saw those pictures, Mom. Oliver. He's alive because of that hospital. And I stood in Jocelyn's kitchen and let them plan to pressure you. I watched them rehearse talking points to convince you to take back the one thing that would save other kids like my son. I'm ashamed of myself. I know, Megan. I should have been the one to say, I'll take care of you. At that Sunday dinner. I should have said it first. And I didn't. Not because I didn't want to. Because I was scared of Jocelyn. I was more afraid of losing her than losing you. And I'm sorry for that. I know that too. A long silence. Not the kind that filled the room at Thanksgiving. A different kind. The kind that happens when two people are standing on opposite sides of a bridge, deciding whether to cross. Can I come see you this weekend? Just me and Oliver? I'd like that. I didn't promise anything. I didn't change a single document. I didn't say I forgive you. Because forgiveness isn't a word you hand someone like a gift. It's something they earn by showing up again and again until the showing up becomes the apology. But I left the door open. That Saturday, Megan and Oliver sat at my kitchen table. Oliver drew me a picture of a whale. From Alaska, he said, even though he'd never been. I hung it on the fridge. In January, I drove to Meadowbrook. The hospital is 40 minutes north of Caldwell, a brick building with a glass atrium and a parking lot full of minivans. I'd been there once before, 5 years ago, when Oliver was wheeled through double doors and I stood in the hallway counting ceiling tiles to keep from screaming. This time, I walked through the front entrance in my Lisbon sweater and a pair of boots I'd bought in New Zealand. A woman named Dr. Claire Ansley, the director of the hospital's Development Foundation, met me in the lobby. She gave me a tour. The pediatric cardiac unit, the recovery rooms with murals of animals painted by local art students, a playroom stocked with books and Lego sets, where children who'd had open-heart surgery sat cross-legged on the floor, building things. I saw a boy, maybe 3, sitting in a wheelchair with a stuffed elephant in his lap. He waved at me. I waved back. My eyes burned, but I kept walking. Dr. Ansley walked me to her office. We sat across from each other, and she explained what my gift would mean. At current estimates, the funds from my estate would support 40 to 50 pediatric heart surgeries for uninsured children over the next decade. 40 to 50 children, 40 to 50 Olivers. I signed a pledge letter, not a check. The money comes from the will after I'm gone. But the commitment was real, and the foundation would begin planning around it. I asked for one thing. I wanted the fund named after both of us. The Ray and Florence Summers Fund for Pediatric Heart Care. Dr. Ansley wrote it down. She looked up and said, Mrs. Summers, this will save children's lives for decades. I looked at the photograph on her wall. A group of kids, all smiling, all standing, and I saw Oliver in every single face. Jocelyn called at the end of January. I was reading on the porch, a blanket over my legs, Basil draped across my ankles like a furry paperweight. Her voice was hard, controlled, like she'd practiced in the mirror. I just want you to know that I think what you're doing is selfish. Dad worked his whole life too. Your father and I saved together, and he told me before he died to spend it on something that matters. I am. We're your children. We matter. I set my book on the armrest. You do, Jocelyn. But mattering and deserving are two different things. I spent 68 years not knowing the difference. I know it now. A pause. She was recalculating, the way she always does when the argument shifts beneath her. My door is always open, I said, but my will is closed. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be about more than money. It has to be about showing up, not for an inheritance, for a person. Jocelyn didn't answer. The line clicked dead. I didn't call back. Derek never called at all. But in February, a short email arrived. 3 sentences. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, Mom. I should have done better. I'm working on some things. I replied, Thank you, Derek. When you're ready, I'm here. I didn't know if Jocelyn would ever come back. I didn't know if Derek would pick up the phone. What I knew was this. I was done being the woman who waited. I was done interpreting silence as love and absence as busyness. I was done carrying a compass that pointed toward people who weren't walking toward me. I set the compass down, and for the first time, I let myself look in a different direction. Spring came early that year. I started volunteering at the Caldwell Public Library, reading hour every Wednesday afternoon. A circle of 5-year-olds on a braided rug, cross-legged, mouths open, while I did the voices for every character in every picture book. The librarian said I was a natural. I told her I'd had 43 years of practice. Ruth and I booked flights to Iceland for the summer. Geysers, northern lights, a hotel made of glass so you can watch the sky while you fall asleep. I'd never even heard of that hotel 2 years ago. Now I had a reservation. I sold the Honda Accord, the one I'd driven for 14 years, the one that still smelled faintly of school glue and hand sanitizer. I bought a Subaru Outback, dark green, not flashy, just right. Megan and Oliver came every Sunday. She brought food now, lasagna, soup, sometimes a pie that was better than mine, though I'd never tell her that. Oliver had a routine. He'd run to the magnolia tree, check for worms, then sit at the kitchen table and draw while Megan and I talked. One evening, he called me from Megan's phone. "Good night, Grandma Flo." It became our nightly ritual. 7:15, every night, rain or shine. I hung new photographs on the living room wall. Alaska, Lisbon, New Zealand, and a new one. Megan and Oliver at my kitchen table, sunlight coming through the window, both of them laughing at something Basil had done. I wrote in my journal that night, the same lined notebook I'd used for lesson plans, now repurposed for a different kind of curriculum. I spent the first half of my life raising children, the second half waiting for them to come back. This part, the third part, this one is mine. I closed the notebook. Basil purred. The magnolia was in bloom. I'm sitting on my porch. It's late May. The azaleas are in full bloom, pink and white, spilling over the fence like they've been waiting all year for permission. Basil is in my lap. The tea is Earl Grey, hot, with 1 sugar, the same way I've made it for 40 years. My phone buzzes, a text from Megan. It's a photograph, Oliver's drawing from school. Grandma's house. A white fence, a magnolia tree, and an orange cat sitting on the porch with a woman in a gray sweater. He drew the sweater in crayon, the same shade as the cashmere I bought in Lisbon. I smile, save the photo, close the phone. A neighbor walks by with her dog. She waves. I wave back. This is what my mornings look like now. Quiet, full, mine. I think about Ray sometimes, about what he'd say if he could see the wall of photographs, the passport full of stamps, the pledge letter framed next to his reading glasses. I think he'd nod. He was never a man of many words. I think about Jocelyn. I haven't heard from her since January. The door is still open, but I'm not standing at it anymore. I think about Derek. His email was short, but it was honest. That's more than I've gotten from him in years. I'll wait, but I won't chase. And I think about Oliver. 7 years old, drawing whales from a place he's never been. Alive because strangers gave money to a hospital, and because one day, his grandmother decided to be the biggest stranger of all. Last week, I deleted the voicemails. All 87 of them. I didn't need them anymore. My name is Florence Summers. I'm 68 years old. I'm a retired teacher, a widow, a mother, and a grandmother. I changed one line in my will, and it changed everything. That's my story. And now I want to hear from you. If you were me, if you'd spent 43 years saving every dollar and your children told you that you were on your own, would you change the will? Or would you give them one more chance? Drop an A in the comments if you'd change it. Drop a B if you'd wait. I want to read every single answer. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that your worth isn't measured by what you give away, hit subscribe and turn on that notification bell. There's another story waiting for you in the description below. It's about a woman who discovered something at her husband's retirement dinner that no one saw coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.